I mean, the main source of CO2 into the atmosphere is burning of fossil fuel. We burn coal, oil, and gas. Altogether, they represent more than 35, 36, 37 billion tons of CO2 being emitted every year. We also emit CO2 with land use change, mainly deforestation in the tropics, primarily. But I mean, today, this represents about 10% of total emission. So broad pictures like 36 come from fossil fuel burning, and about 4 billion tons per year come from deforestation.
We're not making deep enough and broad enough cuts in global carbon emissions to really put us on a track that really allows us to tackle climate change. The growing emissions year on year are responsible for climate change, and as long as they're not brought down to zero, then the warming is going to continue. We have seen some progress, but the progress is at the moment not substantial enough.
You could simplify this into two broad categories. One is emissions, which is when you deforest, you're replacing forest by essentially crops. This is mainly happening in the tropics now. I mean, the big countries is Brazil, Indonesia, the Democratic Republic of Congo. These three countries represent about 55% of current deforestation rate. This is the average over the last 10 years. So these three countries represent more than half of total deforestation. It's primarily for crop plantations or pastures, like in Brazil, it would be for either for crops or for, wild pastures having animals. And Indonesia would be also for plantation. Palm oil for plantation, for example. Congo as well, deforestation for croplands. So it's always for expansion of crops and increasing productivity for agriculture. I mean, it's not always for the country themselves. A large fraction is exported.
Sama ibu itu kah?
There's 26 countries that decreased their emissions for over a decade now while growing their economy. So we're really seeing that it is possible to do. Even the countries where the emissions still grow, they're growing more slowly in the past decade or so than they have done before.
Florida Panthers are doing good.
Because the water is frozen, and so the animals just crawl around out there.
Many European countries, France, Germany, the UK, but also the US, Japan, Brazil for the fossil emissions, they decreased their emissions, South Africa as well. So really many countries of different regions are able to do that now. These countries, most of them decrease their emissions only gently, 1%, 2% for the best of cases, maybe a little more. So that has to accelerate.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Emissions are still growing quite a lot in Southeast Asia, India, China this year, but China has a rebound from COVID. They had confinement measures all the way to 2022, so that explains in part the rebound, the strong growth in China this year. India, renewable energy are growing very rapidly, but the energy demand, because India is developing rapidly, is faster than they can produce with renewable energy. So that explains the growth in emissions.
Jelajahi cara baru mendapatkan informasi. Download MetroTV Extend sekarang.